This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Robin Reid, K-State Extension agricultural economist, starts today's show with reviewing Ark County payments for wheat and expected payments for corn, soybeans, and grain sorghum. K-State Cropping Systems and Forage agronomist John Holman and K-State soil scientist Augustine Obour keep today's show rolling by explaining the 2024 Kansas Cool Season Forage Performance Test. Ending the show is K-State horticultural entomologist Raymond Cloyd with information on the 3 current insect pests, mimosa webworm, fall armyworm, and grasshoppers. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Thursday show discussing ARC and PLC payments with K-State Extension agricultural economist Robin Reid. Robin, thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Robin, some numbers have come out from the Farm Service Agency a little bit earlier than they usually do.
Yeah, normally it's another month before we're talking about these ARC and PLC payments, but the county yields were out and the wheat payments were announced. So this is something I think farmers are really going to be interested in, especially since a lot of areas of the state are going to have payments and really the maximum payments because of the drought that we had last year. And I really like to remind producers, it's so easy to get confused what marketing year we're in. The payments we're getting this October are for the crop we harvested last year. So if you think of wheat, that marketing year ended May 31st and the new one started June 1st. So we're actually a few months into the next marketing year. But really that crop is marketed for an entire year, and then that average price is determined. So one price for all the wheat in the U.S. that was marketed in the past year, and that's what's used to calculate the ARC and PLC payments. And similarly with our fall crops, that marketing year actually ended the end of August. We won't know that August price for a few weeks yet, but this is the crop we harvested last year. Marketing year started September 1st, took a whole year to determine that marketing year average price, and now we can go ahead and calculate those payments.
So for these payments, for that specific marketing year, were there any PLC payments?
No, and I'd say unfortunately no, but it's more like fortunately no. That means prices did not get low enough to hit those payment rates for the price loss coverage or PLC program. So really where we ended in this last marketing year, 2023-2024, our wheat was $6.96, so actually quite high compared to the prices we're seeing now. But again, this marketing year started almost a year and a half ago. And then when we look at our other commodities, our projections right now, there's just, again, that August price yet to be determined, but most of the marketing year is over and very heavily weighted in the beginning of the marketing year. So we can confidently say corn is going to be around $4.61, grain sorghum $4.92, and soybeans $12.46. And again, these are well above PLC reference prices, so we will not see any PLC payments for those 4 commodities this year.
What about for ARC payments?
So again, ARC is driven by the county yield. PLC is always just the price, the national price, and then the producer's own established yield with FSA. So in Ark County, when we're looking at county yields last year, I'm sure everybody is fairly fresh on their mind how bad of a widespread drought that we had. So I'll talk about wheat payments first because, again, those are known, those are announced, those are not going to be changing. When I look at a map across of Kansas that I've developed and have up on AgManager, really what we're seeing is basically the entire 2/3 of central and western Kansas will be seeing dry land payments for wheat. Now, there are some exceptions up in the Northwest, Cheyenne, Rollins, Decatur County. Some of those did not trigger, but most of our counties are going to be triggering wheat payments, and that's just because, again, that county wheat yield was so low. And really, the thing about these payments is when they trigger, they hit the maximum amount pretty quickly. So when you look across the state and look at these payments, most of them are going to be in $25, maybe $30 per acre range. And remember, that is paid on 85% of the producer's wheat base acres. So it doesn't matter what they plant. It matters what their base acres are assigned to, and these payments are made on 85% of those.
Can people on that map you did create, Robin, go in and maybe see some examples or some more data figures around it?
Yeah, and that's why I like taking the FSA spreadsheet of all the payment rates in the entire United States and all these commodities, and I put it on AgManager in an interactive map form. So you take your cursor, hover over your county, and there's a pop-up box that'll tell you all the detail about that payment. So that's where you can see what your guarantee was in that county. So that guarantee is based on a 5-year Olympic average of the county yields and a 5-year Olympic average of the national price. That becomes your benchmark. You start getting payments when revenue falls below 86%. So 86% of that benchmark is your guarantee. So in the paper that I wrote to go along with the maps, I gave an example of Rooks County and how they had a 46.6 bushel wheat guarantee and experienced a 15.7 bushel yield last year. So obviously a catastrophic yield loss. And because of that, even though price went up based on the guarantee of $550, there was over $100 revenue loss. And so obviously hit the maximum payment in that county. And that's the story for a lot of our counties across central and western Kansas when it comes to wheat.
When can producers be expecting this payment usually?
They'll start coming out in early October. Since FSA has already published this information, I would expect we will see those payments pretty quickly after October 1. But yeah, those are direct deposited into a producer's accounts now. It's not going to be a check in the mail. So, yep, they could be watching for them pretty quickly here in the next few weeks.
Robin, wanting to take a look at some other important crops to Kansas, soybeans, corn, and grain sorghum, and why we don't have official numbers from them yet. You mentioned that the data is pretty concrete and you're really confident in it. So what are some trends we're seeing around those other crops?
Yeah, so obviously in those crops too, we had a lot of yield loss or production problems because of the drought last year in 2023. So when I'm looking across the state, let's go ahead and start with soybeans here. What I'm seeing in non-irrigated and what I call combined counties, so there are some counties that don't separate out irrigated and dryland soybeans, and that was just a designation that happened in the 2018 Farm Bill if 10% of their production wasn't in either practice. So there are some combined counties. Primarily those counties would be dryland counties. But anyway, so as far as soybeans, when we're looking at dryland soybeans, really the entire central area of the state would be getting maximum payments, and those payments could be anywhere from $25 to $40 per acre. Not many irrigated payments in soybeans unless you're looking at northwest Kansas, but there's not a whole lot of soybean base out in northwest Kansas. So if you look at the map, you'll see those payments. But for most producers, when you're looking at the central area of the state, there's going to be maximum soybean payments. If we look at corn, again, our non-irrigated and combined counties, we're really going to be seeing payments kind of in this north-central Kansas triangle, I'll call it. So from Decatur to Washington County down to Edwards County, this whole area obviously was in a drought last year, and we'll be getting a fairly significant payment, most of the counties at a maximum payment rate. We also see some payments kind of Flint Hill area for non-irrigated corn, so Morris, Chase, Greenwood, Elk County, even some in Southwest, such as Stanton and Stevens County. And then we do see some sporadic irrigated corn payments as well. So if you have corn base that's primarily irrigated, go take a look at the map for those. Finally, I want to talk about grain sorghum, and a lot of producers are probably tuning out right now because they said, I don't go grain sorghum, this doesn't affect me. I will remind producers a lot of base is still in grain sorghum and wheat, even if you are growing soybeans and corn. So we had an opportunity to reallocate our base acres in 2014 Farm Bill. Many producers did not because that wheat and grain sorghum base actually paid more than corn and soybeans. But nevertheless, so I want to make sure producers understand that there could be grain sorghum payments, even though you haven't been growing grain sorghum in a number of years. So when I'm looking across the state, again, kind of the same picture as corn, non-irrigated and combined counties for grain sorghum, really the western 2/3 of Kansas will be getting grain sorghum payments, with the exception of some counties along the Colorado border. So again, those payments anywhere from $25 to $40 per acre, most of them at the maximum payment rate, and that would be paid on 85% of the grain sorghum base.
And Robin, can you just remind us when usually those numbers do come out?
Yeah, so we'll be watching when they officially come out. It'll be a few weeks as the payments are made in October. I would anticipate FSA to publish their final spreadsheet on these numbers. But again, I'm very, very certain of the numbers we have published because there's only that August price that we're missing in the marketing year average. And because so many of the counties have such a high yield loss, they are so far above the calculated maximum payment that even a little bit of change in that marketing year price is not going to affect the payment they're getting because they're already at the maximum rate.
And just a reminder, where can producers find all this information?
So if you go to AgManager.info, the two papers that I wrote talking about the payments are actually there right on the homepage right now. But otherwise, you can always go look in the Ag Policy section, and there'll be a drop-down menu that says the actual ARC and PLC payments. I have been talking about Kansas in this radio broadcast, but there's actually all of the maps for the entire nation out there as well. It's in a software where you do have to zoom in on your state. And again, then you can hover over your county and get the detail. But all of the FSA data that was published for the entire nation is on AgManager.info.
Robin, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thanks for having me on, Shelby.
That was K-State Extension agricultural economist Robin Reid. In today's show notes on agtoday.net, I will link her to Ag Manager publications, or you can also find them for yourselves by going to AgManager.info. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our show talking about some Kansas forage performance tests with K-State Cropping Systems and forage agronomist John Holman and K-State soil scientist Augustine Obour. John, Augustine, thank you both so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you.
Shelby, always a pleasure.
So today, wanting to first give some background to these performance tests, and Augustine, John, can you tell us where are these set up at?
Sure. So we have three testing locations in the state, at Garden City in the southwest part of the state. That test there is managed under irrigation, where I'm located, where Dr. Obour is located at Hayes. That is a dryland location that he oversees. And then at the Belleville location, Scott Dooley oversees that location.
As we look at it and kind of talking a little bit more about the cool season forages today, what was their growing season like?
Well, it varies from year to year, right? So like John said, in Hayes, this is under dry land. There's no irrigation. So last year was very dry for us. And this is normally planted in October or sometimes towards the end of September through the first week in October, and then we start harvesting these the following year. So the ones that we harvested this year were planted last year, October, and then we harvested them around May, June.
And Augustine, how do you feel like the weather conditions were in Hayes for these varieties?
A little bit very dry. Was dry the whole of last year, fall, and then we were lucky to get some rain in May. So somewhere in the middle of May, we started getting rainfall, and we got pretty okay yields, not as we used to get, but it was decent. Our yields ranges from 1,400 to about 2,300 pounds, depending on when we harvested it. So these forages are actually harvested at boot or subdose stage. So the boot stage yields normally will be lower than when we harvest at subdose. So the subdose yield, the highest, was around 5,200 pounds. And then our highest yield for subdue was around 2,300 pounds per acre. So pretty low. Maybe John can talk to you a little bit about Garden City, where they had a little bit more yields.
Augustine, you might clarify that is the dry matter yields, correct?
Yeah, dry matter yields. No, yeah.
So when we're talking dry matter, what we mean by that is that's 100% dry matter, no moisture in the sample, in the yield at all. We're, as if we're talking silage yields, that can be, between 60 and 70% moisture content. So it's important to make that verification.
And John, how did things look like for you in Garden City then?
Well, at Garden City, we were also quite dry this fall too, but where we had irrigation, we were able to supplemental irrigate, and so by doing that, we didn't have near the stress that the dryland location would have.
And while Scott wasn't able to join us today, hearing similar things from his area in Belleville?
Right, there too. Belleville was also dry this past fall, so his yields were quite similar to the yields that Augustine observed at Hayes.
What were some of the different varieties that were involved with these forage tests?
So I want to clarify, we run two different tests every year. We run a cool season test, which we're in the process of getting in the ground planted now. And then we also manage a warm season test. So for the cool season test, the types of species that we look at would be wheat, triticale, and rye. The warm season species would include forage sorghum, sorghum sudan, millet, and corn. So, and every year we evaluate. There's a few more entries of in the warm season test and the cool season test. But the cool season test, we test approximately 20 varieties at each location every year, and we measure those both as Augustine mentioned. We harvest that at the boot stage, and then we also harvest that at soft dough. Boot stage would be for a hay harvest, and soft dough would be to simulate a silage type yield. The warm season test, we either evaluate varieties in a hay performance test or a silage performance test, and we harvest all of these varieties by growth stage so that we are truly comparing the yield potential of one variety to another. It wouldn't be a fair test to compare things at different growth stages. We also measure forage quality at across these different crop tests as well. At Garden City this past year, we had dry matter yields were double to triple what Augustine and Scott observed. Our yields there at Garden City were as high as 13,000 pounds of dry matter per acre for the soft dough, and the earlier harvest at Boot yields approach 9,000 pounds of dry matter per acre. So some really high yield potential opportunities with some of these newer forage varieties.
How might a farmer producer be able to integrate this into their operation, or maybe use these data points that you guys have taken the time to collect?
Excellent question. So, there are several things they can do. One thing we do not recommend is only looking at 1 year results. It's good to see how a variety performs across years. And that all the years of data going back several years are available on the crop performance testing page for forages on the agronomy website. So growers can identify varieties that are best suited maybe for an irrigated type situation, looking at the Garden City data, or dryland data, looking at Hayes and the Belleville data. They can also look at the quality aspects of these varieties, because some varieties have a little better crude protein and energy value than other varieties do.
Like John said, you just have to go back to look at the data that we have. So we have data since 2013 that is on the website, and then we also have a recent eUpdate with this year's data. So you look at that, and then you can make a decision on the varieties that we have there, what will fit your production system. Either you grow it as a hay or silage. You can look at what works best for your system.
And the 2024 Kansas Cool Season Forage Performance Tests are out now. However, will there be more information coming out from these Cool Season Forage tests?
Right. The quality data takes a while to get processed and available. So that's available. We have the yield data. We make that yield data available just as soon as possible for growers to be able to make planting decisions based on yield. Right now in the next coming few weeks, and then of course, like I say, they can refer back to past years to see how those perform. But then all the quality data is there as well for most of these varieties, so they can see how they perform. And Augustine brings up a good point. The best variety for silage may not be the best variety for hay. So depending on what that producer's end goal is, they can select a variety that to best suit their particular needs.
Augustine, John, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
All right,
thank you
for having us.
That was K-State Cropping Systems and Forage Agronomist John Holman, and he was joined by K-State Soil Scientist Augustine Obour as they discussed the 2024 Kansas Cool Season Forage Performance Test. There are a few different ways you can find these tests. I will put a link to it in today's show notes on agtoday.net. You can find them by going to agronomy.k-state.edu, or they are also linked in Agronomy eUpdate article, which you can find by going to eupdate.agronomy.ksu.edu. Before we cut to a break, we're now going to be joined by USDA's Gary Crawford and Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack as they discuss what it will take to pass a new farm bill.
The way things are going or not going on Capitol Hill right now, it's going to be very hard to get a new farm bill passed.
And that's just the honest truth.
The honest truth from Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack. He told a group of visiting Farmers Union members Monday what he thinks needs to happen in order to get a farm bill on the books.
What needs to happen is for folks to be in the room, and by folks I mean the leadership of the House and the Senate Ag committees, with permission from their leadership to hammer out a deal.
Vilsack said yes, a farm bill could raise farm program reference prices,
but not at a point where it creates a circumstance where you have to take money from the nutrition programs or where you have to deal with budget gimmicks.
Vilsack said if lawmakers cannot compromise on a practical farm bill, then as far as trying to get something passed by the end of the year,
you're going to have a hard time.
Hard time. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but stick around because we do have more for you up ahead.
This is Agriculture Today. Along with Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. K-State horticultural entomologist Raymond Cloyd says there are 3 insect pests that we should be aware of: mimosa webworms on honey locust trees, fall armyworms in turf grass, and grasshoppers. He explains whether any control measures should be taken. Raymond, several things to cover this week. Mimosa webworm, let's start there.
Okay, Jeff, that's a good one because right now if you're in Kansas and observing mimosa honey locust trees, you'll notice they're brown like they've been hit with a blowtorch. That's the damage caused by mimosa webworm. Mimosa webworm is a caterpillar, and it feeds initially on the epidermal layers of a leaf and then causes the leaf to fold, and you start to get that browning. So this year, at this point, it's too late to do anything. But next year, be cognizant of aware when you see initial damage on your honey locust, you can spray with the typical insecticide we recommend for caterpillars. I think Bacillus thuringiensis kurostaki, which we call BTK, or spinosad. Will they damage the trees? Yes, they make them look awful aesthetically, but if they're large trees, they probably will not kill them unless they get several years of complete defoliation because the plants get photosynthesized, there's just no green leaves on them. So it's probably warranted or justifiable to try to avoid that from occurring year after year by monitoring and looking for the caterpillars when they're young. They're green, they're very active. They create a silken strand that allows them to move around and drop to the soil. So if you're looking at these honey locust trees and they're brown, all over. That's caused by the mimosa webworm.
So nothing this year, but something next year.
Correct. And its timing is critical because you do have a very short window of opportunity to find them and then make your applications, because once those leaves are folded over, it's too late. It's similar to the red-bud leaf folder and other caterpillar pests that web or roll the leaves over. That protects them from insecticide applications.
Also wanted to talk about fall armyworm. You're getting some questions.
Yeah, fall armyworm, I think it was 3 years ago, we had, I would call it catastrophic infestations. They're a caterpillar. So let me go back. They don't overwinter in Kansas. They overwinter in Florida and Texas, and they get caught on the jet streams. The adults do, and then they get deposited in Kansas. Now, I have seen masses of eggs on porches and other structures, which where the female will lay the eggs, and the caterpillars will emerge from those. We've actually seen, I've gotten emails, images of turf that's been fed upon. So if you see egg masses or brown structures on patio furniture, on your house, just take a forceful water spray and dislodge it. Then, be cognizant of caterpillars, because they will feed on the turf grass. We are getting later on in the season, so I think we're only going to have maybe the one generation. But just be aware, if you have a service that takes care of your yard, make them aware that you might have some issues with fall armyworm. And then if they do see them, they can apply the appropriate treatment.
We're also seeing grasshoppers.
Grasshoppers are everywhere. I've gotten a number of inquiries about grasshoppers. Well, the reason is because we had mild summer overall compared to last year. And, I have a green lawn in September. So the weeds and vegetation is a food source for grasshoppers. And really, unfortunately, there aren't many options for grasshoppers in regards to management, protecting plants. They're very mobile. The adults, particularly, the nymphs cannot fly, but they can hop around on their legs, and they feed on just about everything. So removing weeds or weed eating, mowing frequently will help. Their insecticides are marginally, if effective at all, because the cuticle, which is the skin of an insect, is very waxy, and most of your insecticides just don't stick to it. Maybe adding surfactant may help, but really, they're migratory. They come in. You'd have to spray all the time. There are some products out there. We've looked at a brand bait for that's carbaryl in it for grasshoppers. You apply it. The results can be inconsistent because it depends on the grasshopper type, species, and what they're feeding upon. So if you want more information about grasshoppers, contact the Department of Entomology, and we'll do the best we can help you. But again, I'd like to emphasize the options are very limited at this point.
That's K-State horticultural entomologist Raymond Cloyd with an update on mimosa webworm, fall armyworm, and grasshoppers. For more information, contact your local extension office. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.